Okay, today is November 12th in the year 2010. I'm Karen Herman with the Archive of American Television, and it is my pleasure to be doing part 2 interview with Matthew Weiner here at the Television Academy headquarters in North Hollywood.
Hi, Karen.
Hello. So when we left off, I'm actually going to take you back to,
Sure.
You had talked about, in the first part, you talked about actually selling the series. But let's talk about the development of it once it started for Mad Men.
The development of the series? Mm-hmm. Do you mean like once it's been ordered, or?
Once you got the okay.
Well, the okay was, a pilot process, but the pilot was already written. And as I said, I had based the trajectory for the season on this movie that I'd written quite a bit of time beforehand. So, having worked on a lot of pilots, all we did was focus on the pilot. We tried to get the best cast and the best crew, and I've talked many times about, fighting for John Hamm and fighting for unknown people, and they weren't unknown to television viewers. They just were not stars of TV shows. They were not main characters on them, but they'd all had big resumes.
Why did you have to fight?
It's interesting because they were on board with the idea that they didn't want to have a star because they didn't want to pay for it. And I didn't necessarily want to pay for it, and we couldn't really draw people to AMC because, even Bryan Cranston, and when you talk to him, which I'm sure you will at some point, has told me that he came to do Breaking Bad. He loved the script and everything, thought it was amazing, but they showed him Mad Men, and he said, oh, yeah, I'll come and work with you guys, you're for real. It was, who knows? He's unknown, they're scared, everything was riding on it, and you sort of have to have a conversation where you're like, this means as much, if not more, to me. I'm not going to do that. They have to trust your judgment. I fought for him. There was an executive there, a woman executive, who did not think that he was sexy. And that's kind of funny. And the other thing is that, to their credit, he's an unknown. What would you know? And he didn't audition as well as he ended up being. But he certainly had all the qualities. He's totally understood the script. He had he had a little bit of, I've never said this before, and I don't like to be critical of him in any way, but I didn't understand part of what they were worried about is that he had a little bit of the leading man disease from being on television. He had a little bit of a handsome, sort of gravelly kind of intensity that was not altogether authentic in certain scenes. On the other hand, the big scenes, like the It's Toasted scene, which was part of the audition, there was no one who was even close to him, what he was doing. And they said to me, is this the best person for the part, or is this the best person that you've seen? And I was like, I don't know. I just think he's the guy. So we flew him out here. I flew him out to New York on my airline miles. And he went for a drink with the female executive in question who wasn't crazy about him. I did not go. It was her and Scott Hornbacher, the producer, I think, and there were no other women there. And she spoke to him, and he was very I talked to him the night before. I'm like, this is one of those big moments in your life. Just know that, I'm not going to back away from this. And if they don't do it, then someone else is going to end up doing the show because I can't lose this battle in particular. And I think he was, at the time anyway, kind of, he's always expressed gratitude to me for it. He knows it. But at this point, who's to say, I don't know, the show would have been a success without him. I always accept his gratitude because I did go on the line for him. But obviously, we created the character together at this point.
How close was he to what you had envisioned when you were writing that script?
Your imagination is different than real people. And I don't always write with a human being in mind. It sort of becomes this kind of psychic entity. And I knew he had dark hair, but I would have cast a blonde person if they'd had the qualities. I always thought about James Garner. I thought about George Clooney, because George Clooney was, had made one movie that was not successful, and I thought, oh, he'll be back in TV. I thought about Vince Vaughn, who had done Swingers at that time. I liked the James Garner-ness of it, and George Clooney has the most of that, which is this sort of Boy Scout, this kind of virtuous person with a, If you watch the Americanization of Emily by Patty Chayefsky and Arthur Hiller, I think, directed it, that's kind of the guy I wanted Don to be. So, seeing John Hamm and seeing this handsome guy, as I've said, who's not a football player in a suit, who has this intelligence, who has a sensitivity, who seems wounded. And also, I told you, I think I said my litmus test, which was when I would look at the actors, I would say, like, at the end of the pilot, you're going to find out he's married. So does this person have the qualities that I will not hate them? And I don't mean like on the likability scale. I mean, am I going to think he's ungrateful and arrogant and slick and glib? Or am I going to realize that he has a problem that's more complicated that the audience can deal with? And John had that.
Any other casting problems going forth when you started?
Elizabeth Moss went through right away. I had a lot of disagreements with the director, with Alan Taylor, because he has a very eccentric sense of casting. He's cast his own movies many times, and we both are like students of David Chase. We're both sort of in awe of the process, and David was not crazy about Alan's casting either, and sort of said to me, like, I was like, I don't know, Alan likes this guy, likes that guy. There were a lot of people that ended up in the show that Alan was not crazy about. Maggie Siff, Vincent Kartheiser. I mean, they know this. I'm not like outing him. And he has a different taste. And by the way, the actors he wanted to play these parts were great actors. It's not like that. They just weren't right for the parts. And, we saw a guy for Pete named Zach Orth, who is a phenomenal actor, like a really gifted actor. We did the audition, and I was said afterwards it was like driving a Ferrari. Like, he could do everything. And, we would quote David Chase to each other saying, like, hire the best actor. And I was like, you know what? Vincent is younger. And that is part of the story. Zach was almost the same age. And it's important to have this in the story. And he goes, really? And I'm like, yeah. This main character is dealing with someone who's much younger than him. That's good story. Pete's entitled and all these other things. And Vincent also, I just loved how weird he was, Vincent's the actor who makes the biggest transition from like who he is as a person to who he's playing. That is it's complete. But the network, did have money for me to hire a British actor. And they were really pushing for this. It was the style. And someday, if this lasts in the archive, I will put it on there. I can't name the shows, but it was a belief that British actors could come in and do all these parts. And you could get a very high-quality English actor who'd done a lot of film work and might be even famous to come and do American TV, because it was just like they would work for the money and they're actors. They didn't have any stigma, especially being in the United States. But I hear the accent. I told them no British actors, no New Zealand people, and they could bring them in. And there's a lot of great actors like that. And when I started having British people in the show, I'm like, bring them on, let me see them. But I was like, if I hear their accent, you don't have to tell me, but if I hear an accent, I'm not gonna hire them. And I have a pretty sensitive ear to that, probably too sensitive. And there are people who fooled me, believe me. Anthony LaPaglia, I had no idea. I would bet money that he was American. But anyway, it's the rest of the casting was, January was, I didn't have to fight for January, but January was very expensive to come in and do one line. She's kind of had a movie career going. And I really just thought, since the wife had one line, let's just do the pilot and hire a model or a SAG person, obviously, but a lower-level actress, because I also didn't have any more than those few lines for her. And January kept auditioning for Peggy, and finally they said, she'll do it, and I had to write a scene for her to audition with, which was the first scene I had written with those characters since the pilot, and she didn't have a character in the pilot. She just stood there and looked beautiful and said, there's a plate in the oven. And we ended up using it in the show. It's in episode 6 of the show in Babylon, where she talks about how she doesn't want to get old and how her mother just died and how she's going to lose her beauty and be invisible and how she thinks about having sex with him all day, which was kind of a twist on the traditional character, too. Because that woman is always seen as being frigid. That's her problem. I don't think people even use that word anymore, but that's the word used at that time, and certainly through the 70s and 80s, just that this woman is so sexually repressed, and that's why she's so controlling and unhappy, and her hands are numb. And I felt like that woman married that guy because he is sexy, and she doesn't know anything about him. The sex is the important part, and she probably feels very, because of the way she was raised, self-conscious about it.
So you really didn't know much about the characters outside of that pilot then at that point?
No, their backstory and everything? No. I mean, you borrow some of it when you cast. You really do. I mean, Elizabeth Moss is not from Brooklyn, and she has no accent. But I knew that Peggy was Norwegian by background because she was from Bay Ridge, and I thought that was fascinating. And I made her half Norwegian and half Irish Catholic, and I got to do a real American Brooklyn story, you know. I knew where they were from and everything, but no, I mean, I had the idea after the pilot that Pete was this New York royalty, that he was New York Dutch, and that he had that old, you know, because they're fascinating to me because they're like Democrats, but they're really, really rich, and they're proud of Roosevelt, but they also feel betrayed by him, and their streets are all named after them, and they exist before the British came, and they're kind of business-oriented, but they have this, all the confusion of class in America goes great with that story. So things like that I sort of thought of as we went. Cooper, I didn't know who Cooper was. John Slattery was not happy about not being Don and was not enjoying working on the pilot. He had been passed over for a Tony nomination for Rabbit Hole, which is probably going to win the Oscar this year, or for Aaron Eckhart, or at least get him a nomination. John was amazing in that play, was ignored, and he was in a bad mood. And he felt his age, I think, on some level, and I thought on some level that he was only going to last 2 or 3 episodes. I had his heart attack planned right away. I didn't know that he would survive it. Of course, then we came out, everybody saw the pilot, and they got very excited when it was ordered, and we came out to Los Angeles, and second episode. It's the only time I've ever seen John Hamm nervous. The first scene we shot after the pilot, you know, a year and a half later, he and Slattery were both nervous. And they all got on board right away. They saw the second script, and they were like, oh my God, this is really cool. It was very exciting to me. The network hated it. The studio hated the second script. It was all about Betty. And they tried to take the show away from me during the editing process.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, they saw the cut, and one of the things that happened, this is the way show business works, you know, you like never know all the details, but one of the things that happened was the editor, who his wife was a friend of mine and is a very talented network TV editor and creative person, but he left a day early to celebrate a family birthday, did not tell me, and I had to turn the cut in early. That was number one. First cut, first show after the pilot. And I thought, well, they'll know it's a work in progress, and we'll go along with it. And the other thing is that I don't like, Malcolm Jameson, who cut the pilot with me, we sort of developed a style that does not have overlapping dialogue. So that when we're talking, I say my line, and then I cut to a reaction of you saying your line, instead of showing you listening to me in the middle of the lines. And what I felt that was about was, it's part of what people experience with the pace and the intensity of the show, is this particular editing style. It's not really a retro editing style. It's not like it's old, but it is different. I don't see it in movies as much, but now you see it constantly because they want to pace it up and they just keep going. And I felt like, and this is not a slight on the West Wing, it's just I wanted the style of the show to be different. I did not want rapid-fire talking. I did not want people to have to repeat themselves over and over and over again. That rhythmic thing that Aaron Sorkin does, which he had done already. You know, if the West Wing had never happened, my show would have looked like that. But I didn't want to do that. And I felt that the dialogue was so dense, and it's certainly elevated. It sounds natural because the actors are good, but it's not really natural. It's spoken by me. I dictate the scripts. So it's natural for me, but it is pointed and it is condensed. And I felt like it was unbelievable that another human being could react to these sentences that quickly, that they could absorb the information. And Aaron Sorkin does this also, and a lot of writers do. Pat Chayefsky does it. Rod Serling does it. But what they do a lot of times is with repetition. And I didn't want to do that. So people say things once. Maybe they'll say them again if somebody says what to them, which I do a lot. I don't let them understand right away. There's drama to me in absorbing information. You know, I had your baby and I gave it away. What? You know, and then she has a reason to explain it. So we had developed the style, and the editor really said the network isn't going to hate this, and he'd heard about it, and he kind of tried to force me into doing it the way they wanted it. So it came in with a lot of overlapping, and it was a strange beast, because I wanted it to be a French movie. which I don't think anyone at a TV station wants to hear. I wanted to be this psychological thing that said that Betty, and these moments that I had that were so cinematic that I was indulging my subconscious. I wanted you to meet who this woman was. They didn't like the fact that it was focusing on her already. They were worried about the script. She wanted to see a psychiatrist after she had this breakdown, and it had this holy shit that I had promised them at the end of every script, which was Don called her shrink and violated that. So I thought I had done it all, and I thought Alan Taylor did a really good job with it. But I did not like his editing, as I didn't on the pilot, and he himself would admit that's not his strength. And I was working through trying to get this new editor to do what Malcolm and I had done, and it takes time, and I didn't have the time. So it went in, and there was this shitstorm, which actually I got texts, they're looking for replacements. We were shooting episode 6 already at this time, Babylon. And I thought we were doing really well. I was scared, but I thought we were doing well, that I'd even written 6 scripts and had the season planned out. I don't know if it would work, but we were nowhere near being on the air. And they actually called Alan Taylor, as is their right, the director, and got his cut and told me that that's what they wanted to do. And I basically had to say, had to fight for it and say, he doesn't get to do this. This is not what you promised me. It's the only confrontation I've ever had on there that didn't end with me saying, I quit. I'll walk away from this thing, and you'll have $30 million slipping through your fingers. I actually fought for it, and it wasn't done with agents or anything else like that. What happened is that Malcolm came in and recut the show. It was longer than the cut that I gave them, and the composer David Carbonaro wrote his first few cues for things like Betty looking at Don in bed and saying, "Who's in there?" And this amazing speech to me where Don is what do women want? That spark between he and Roger, that's all in there. That's all in that second episode, which is like the first episode of the series. That I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying it's like these were Betty, the dissolve Malcolm put in there between Betty curling up after her car accident. She's had a car accident, a very low speed, disappointing car accident for the network. They read about it and they're like, she rolls into a bird bath. I'm like, that's what it is. I don't want to be scared. I want you to see that her hands that she's having psychosomatic symptoms because she saw this divorced woman dragging a box down her driveway and realized that she could be alone if she wasn't with her husband. And that sent her into a panic, and she got in an accident. And dissolving from her curled up on the side of that car, which I actually reshot because Alan didn't have time to get it. Our location stuff has not worked out yet. There was a lot of scenes in that show, too. I hadn't figured out how to do it in 7 days yet. And dissolving from that to Don in bed with his mistress. And the audience just sort of going, oh. And Don solving his creative problem in bed with his mistress. Figuring out the right guard thing, what do women want, any excuse to get closer. And here's his wife who doesn't know him. I was very proud of it. We won that battle. And then the episodes started coming in, the one with the birthday cake, the one with the first one that was solid was the one with Pete in the apartment, which was episode 4, where they just said, shut up. We're fine with this. We don't know if this is going to work, but we see that you're doing what you said you would do. And then, we went on the air. They didn't have a lot of money for promotion. It was a huge critical success immediately. Their publicity department was great at that. I was good at giving interviews. And all of a sudden, we were kind of off to the races. And, we got a 0.9 or something on the pilot, which is a 900,000 person audience, which is not huge. But AMC had a 0.1 in that time slot before that. So it was a 900% increase. The ad time during that hour went from being $10,000 for the $30,000 to buy the entire hour on AMC in prime time to being, even that first season, to being, $25,000 for a minute. So that was, and now who knows what, now when you buy time in Mad Men, you have to buy the entire network. You have to buy ads for the whole week on all of their other old movies and everything.
Did things lighten up once they saw the potential?
Things never lightened up because, things never lightened up. They hadn't picked up the show. We finished the show. I went to the Emmys. We were not eligible for them, but I won an Emmy with The Sopranos that year. and they still had not picked up the show. The show had been off the air for a month. And then they picked up the show, and I can't even explain it. I don't know how it works. They're kind of, Lionsgate are pros, and they're street fighters, and they're always about saving money. They wanted us the second season to cut the budget by like 30% after we'd succeeded, and come in on budget, by the way. So I was like, where's the reward for doing this? And AMC, because of their corporate structure or their ambivalence about how this worked, I don't think they saw, they were only interested in ad revenue. I don't think they saw the financial value to rebranding their network, to being perceived as a rival to HBO. I kept putting all these messages in the show. I kept having Don saying to Rachel Menken, you have to lose the customers you have to get the customers you want. And things like that, where I kept trying to explain to them what was going on. But you know what? In the end, they always do the right thing. It's just, it's owned by Cablevision. It's owned by cable. The vertical integration thing is actually going on with our show. During the strike, I'm at an independent studio and an independent network. I mean, they really are mavericks. They also have a lot of thoughts creatively, which was irritating to me, but we sort of struck a balance. And then the network, on the other hand, was very much of the Mad Men era. It was being run on a corporate level. It still is. And things are done. It's a family business. It's just, I can't say it's antiquated because they're very, very successful. There's a visionary man behind that company, the older Dolans, and then his son also runs it with him. And I'm not, privy to their decisions, but everything was sort of done in this corporate sort of projections and, ad revenue and, quarterly stuff that I have nothing to do with. And so it was interesting, though, because it was really like the old television model, cable, but television model, and then these, street fighters. And I am just trying to make the show I want to make it and hope that the audience comes to it. I have the same complaints everybody has. Like, why aren't you advertising off the network? Why don't my billboards have the dates on them? Why aren't, how come you can't get John Hamm on a talk show? And we also were dealing with something that the Academy took a long time to deal with, even though we won the Emmy that first year. The Sopranos won the Emmy the year before, the first year I was there, season 5. I don't think people know that they had never won that show before. And there was tremendous resistance to cable, and the feeling was that these awards were only for network TV, and we couldn't get to have all of the promotion that you do for the Emmys. We weren't really included in it. We fought for it. Murray Weissman fought for it, and I don't think it was Schaffner yet, but basically Rocky Chatfield also fought for it to say, like, this is a great show. We should embrace television. We shouldn't have this segregation. And to me, it was always mysterious anyway because they're all owned by the same companies. I was like, why does NBC, why is Viacom, who owns CBS, fighting to keep Dexter from getting an Emmy nomination? I was like, I never understood it. So it's hard to explain to people now that the genie's been let out of the bottle, but we were really, there's resistance to it still. Like, why are these guys that have no audience getting awards at our award show? And I kind of said, my stars weren't presenting, they weren't being allowed on network TV talk shows, no one's gonna promote someone else's network, no one's gonna promote cable, no one's gonna do any of this stuff. And I was just like, the Emmy Awards are about excellence, they're not about audience. And also, on the crass side of it, they are in August and September to promote the fall season. They are about the promotion of television. And I am entitled to promote, I'm a member of the Academy, and I'm entitled to promote my business through your awards. Even if we show up and lose, I would like to see John Hamm up there presenting an award. And of course now the whole thing sort of turned over, and it took a lot longer time than it would take on another show, on a network TV show. When you go to the Emmys, I don't care if it's Jimmy Smits, even if they're not a star yet, the star of their new show will be out there presenting. And my people were nowhere near any of that stuff we'd already won twice before anybody was asked to do anything.
Did you see eventually the cachet of winning an Emmy? Did anything happen from that?
It never translated into money with the people that I work with. they put a sticker on the DVD. The Golden Globe was very important to them because it's international. The Emmy was important to them outside of my earshot. Did it ever translate into money? I don't know. Did it translate into status for me personally? Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing, amazing thing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we were recognized. We weren't even covered in the LA Times because they were so oriented towards network TV. The year that we won the Emmy, it was all about how little watched. They still call us little watched Mad Men. It was the lowest rated Emmys like for a long time, and there was some blame placed on the fact that we did not have a big audience on our show. And I will remind everyone that it was the year that the reality hosts hosted the Emmys. And by the way, ratings is a confusing thing to me because they're really based on the previous thing. And they said, oh, people aren't excited about the nominees. There's none of their favorite shows are in there. If Lost was nominated, I mean, there were huge audiences for these shows. I was on the writers' committee. I was like, why has it taken them 6 years to start giving an award for reality TV when this is all anybody talks about? And then that to me, I had a joke about it that I did not say in my speech because I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to say this if we win. And she goes, you are not. And my joke was that we work very hard on our show through casting and production design and all these things to create the feeling that the show happened 47 years ago. And then I come to the Emmys and you guys are doing it without any effort at all. It was a time capsule. There were skits. And you know what? And I know all those people at this point. I know Jeff Probst. He you know, they should not have been doing that. But the idea that the ratings were low because our show wasn't well known enough was ridiculous to me. Absolutely ridiculous to me. So the cachet of the show, and then it's interesting, over time, literally the second season, it was like perennial favorite. We never got to have the breaking in period. It was like, of course, look who's there again. The awards hog, Mad Men. I was like, we just got here, you know? But I can't complain about any of that. I really can't. I hope it doesn't sound that way. I always say if I were to write down my top 10 things that I expected to happen with the show, they're not even close to what happened with the show. Not even close. The things that happened far exceeded everything. We went to the Television Critics Awards, and we were nominated for 4 awards, and we won 3 of them. They only give 8 awards. I didn't even know what to say at a certain point. I have these waves of everybody who sits in this chair, these waves of like, I'm a fraud.
What were your top 3 expectations?
My dreams?
Yeah.
My dreams are like, I wanted to be in a Saturday Night Live skit. I would love to be satirized in a sketch on Saturday Night Live. I wanted to have a joke about us in The Simpsons. I wanted to get to go to one of these awards things, one of them. Just get to go and have a place going there. You know, I went with The Sopranos and we won, and I'm a producer on the show, and it meant a lot to me, and I certainly feel confident now anyway about my contribution to the show. At the time, you're sort of like, it's David's show, it's, you know, what, and I was never treated like anything but the new guy, 5 seasons in. No matter what, even 12 episodes in, after writing like a third of it for 3 years, I never ever felt like anything but the new guy. But I just wanted to be invited to one of those things. And I wanted to meet certain people, you know, find out that they'd seen my work. I wanted to be on Terry Gross. I wanted to do Charlie Rose. You know, this is your like childhood like fantasy. I mean, none of these things existed, but this is your childhood fantasy of like, wouldn't it be cool? And basically, I wanted everything that David was enjoying, and I knew it was selfish to think that that would ever happen so close to 2 people at the same time. You know, or, you know, I was prepared. Let's put it this way, and I tell this to my staff too. When I got on The Sopranos, I had a lot of people that had known me for a long time saying like, enjoy us, and enjoy this. Enjoy The Sopranos. This is the best it's ever going to be. Really savor it. And I would get this twinge of saying, like, really? Not that it wasn't great, but like, really? And Terry Winter would always joke with me, we're going to be at the conventions. We're going to be signing things at the conventions like the Star Trek people, I wrote episode 9, or Matt Weiner and Terry Winter, writers, because David's dead, they'll ask us to speak. David's always dead in these fantasies. No. So it seemed greedy to think that I had been standing next to where this lightning bolt hit and that it would hit me. But all of that's like, it makes it sound like I'm doing it for another reason. The idea that I could complete a season and be in charge was also something like I just want to make the pilot and sell it. And then it was just like I just want to make the pilot. Then I just want to sell the pilot. Then I just want to get through the season. Twin Peaks. It'd be great to be Twin Peaks. It'd be great to be this eccentric show that people love that had no follow. That like disappeared in its youth.
We'll talk about a little bit about the audiences. You mentioned them. Who is the Mad Men audience?
Well, I have some issues with the rating system. I am confused by it. I have a unique thing. These terms at some point will sound very antiquated, hopefully, but our show has no time slot. It runs twice in the same evening. It is available for download the next day. It is with huge numbers that are not revealed to me because they're so large because they don't want to pay me. It is the most popular thing on video on demand, which is also available that week. It is downloaded illegally. It's on 7 times a week. You can buy it within 24 hours and have it for yourself. How the ratings are calculated, I have no idea. The idea that we would be judged on ratings anyway when you look at Lost and it's on once a week and you can't get near it, and you have to watch it, and you have to watch it live also. They sell TiVos with our show, the cable companies. It is one of the, as I said, most TiVo'd shows. So the +7 numbers, none of that was included the first year. No one would ever talk about the fact that no one watched it live, which doesn't mean they weren't watching the commercials, but no one watched it live. We had great numbers if we were on HBO, but they have a different model. The actual humans that watch the show, I have my anecdotal experience and I have the numbers, and they both are similar. Teenagers, college students, women in their 20s, men in their 20s, men in their 30s and 40s, women in their 30s and 40s, men and women in their 50s and 60s, and people in their 80s. And they talk to each other about it. And they all watch for different reasons. And the most incredible thing to me was hearing all these stories about women in college, talking to their moms about it. Was this what it was like? Meeting, 17, 18-year-old boys, we won't call them men even, talking about identifying with the loneliness, the alienation that's presented there. It hits you on a certain level. So if you're a human being, and then there's people who were there who enjoy it. There's people who think they were there who enjoy it. A lot of people see themselves as Sally. I wasn't even born. I'm born in 1965. I see myself a lot through Sally, but I see myself, because to me the show is about right now. So I love the fact that the audience, I'm not selling or anything, there's nothing to sell here. The audience is like that. And I never have had the experience like I had on The Sopranos where, I'm sure it's true, there are people who just like the makeup and the hair and think John Hamm's sexy. But I don't see as much of that. Like on The Sopranos, there was this whole thread of people who seemed to have no idea what the show was really about, who just wanted to, and by the way, not connected to their education, financial status, anything, profession. The head of New Republics, and it's not like the Jersey bartender was the guy who was like, I want to see somebody get whacked. You never knew who was going to say that. Why wasn't there more blood on the show? But I didn't run into as many people who watched the show and I thought had no idea what it was. A lot of times they can't even verbalize it. But I think that's the audience's, Rocky Chatfield, came up to me and said, when I started writing, they gave me a male partner who didn't do anything, who I split my check with because no one would take a meeting alone with me. And then also told me that her husband was Don Draper. Told me lots of things, you know what I mean? People, the things that people tell me who were there, and I get to experience all that. How many guys in their 40s, in their 30s are like want to be cool like that, and then you're sort of watching it and saying like, is it so cool, But there is a cultural experience that was simultaneous with the show, which is this subversive kind of retraction from conformity, and that's kind of what the show's about, and that's sort of what was going on right now.
Are there a lot of people that don't get it that you hear from?
I don't. That's what I'm saying. I don't really get that experience. There are people who don't like it, and that's cool. It's totally cool. I said like that the show is not going to be for everybody. I want it to be for everybody. I think if they gave it a chance, they would find it interesting. But there are people who turn on TV and they want to do their checkbook and they want to like eat popcorn and they want to see people get blown away, or they want to see something they've already seen. I'm the same way. Like Agatha Christie. Where is that scene where he takes everybody into the drawing room and says, one of you did it? I want that. But that's not the only kind of entertainment there is. And there are people who are given anxiety by seeing things related to their life. There are people who don't want catharsis. And there are people who require, even though they talk about... The funniest thing to me is that it's hard to explain now what the world was like before the show was there. Because there's a kind of like conversation about it sometimes where it's like, well, obviously, and we know this, and this is the way it was done, and no one paid attention to this period. No one knew what it was. The first season of the show, people did not know who had won the Nixon and Kennedy election. They didn't go on the internet and look. There was no attention paid to this period. And there also was no attention paid to sort of the inner life, and the stories that I'm tapping into that we talked to, like Gatsby and stuff like that. It was not in style. It was not in style to have a story that people did not know the ending to. David would constantly trying to say to people like, I'm giving you a new story. Bear with me. You don't want to see the same thing every week. You say you do, but you don't. So there was something. It was The Sopranos. But I don't think people... The biggest criticism all the time was that it was slow, and it is hypnotic, and it certainly seems slower when the commercials are blaring at you at 10 dB higher than what the show is, and that nothing happened. To which I said, Don doesn't kill people. I'm sorry. It's a soap opera. I'm like, because you hate soap opera. Because people have been watching that forever. It's melodrama. It's a genre. Like, live with it. You love it. People have been making... Shakespeare made money on it.
You had mentioned about, that no one had paid attention to that period, but the show is so well known for it being so close to trying to get the style of that period. Can you talk about how important that was to you?
It was important to me to have a philosophy. I wrote the show and lived through people trying to pay attention to that period or being somehow related to it. I mentioned this about living through Far From Heaven, and thank you, what was the George Clooney movie about Edward R. Murrow, and there were people in that thing. And I always looked at a movie like What's Love Got to Do with It, which is a really good movie about Ike and Tina Turner, but was really the philosophy of period, of how period is done in the United States, which is everything is from that day. Go to the magazines and give people the juice. Let them see the 70s in that case, or the 60s in that case, or whatever. And my feeling was, I didn't have any money. I knew I couldn't go outside. I had a richly appointed interior, I said, is always as interesting as an exterior. So I wanted detail, no matter what. And I had this philosophy, which was, look around you. All periods exist at once. We're not going to go back. Let's try for reality. And reality is more expensive and takes more effort than fantasy and glamour. And in fact, by removing detail, you really create glamour. And so the clutter was something I was interested in. And it's ironic because it was photographed so beautifully that I don't think it really was ever as gritty as I imagined it being. On the other hand, I love what we did. But it looks beautiful, but there's all these things that I asked for. Sweat stains on the actors, collars askew, makeup that looks like it's been applied by the women by themselves, hairdos that decay, and clothing that was from different periods. I'd written it in there that the busboys You know, it says busboy. The man says he's in his 50s, that his uniform is too tight. I had written it in there that Peggy's outfit was from the 40s and that she looked dowdy. Because if you look around, your house has Betty Draper's, they wanted to do everything like googie, like super sexy 50s, high 50s, early 60s style. And I'm like, Betty Draper lives in Westchester. She's going to have an early American bedroom set. She's going to have her antiques. That's what they always had. That's what you have. And you can't look at the movies from that period because they are design leaders. You can't look at Vogue magazine and say this is what people were wearing because regular people can't get clothes from Vogue. Rachel Menken can, but there's a 2 or 3 year delay on these things. Look at your family photos. You will see that, just like today, people's taste in clothing stalls out at the period when they look their best, which is usually high school. And by the way, you know, when you're in your 40s and you're dressing a courant, you know, if Don was wearing a European 3-button suit like Pete, he's going to look like an idiot. And so those are the things we sort of talked about. And luckily, I had this great guy on the pilot, John Dunn, and then Janie Bryant came in and just like swang for the fences. But I wanted the costumes. I wanted Joan, for example. Once we'd hired that woman, I was like, I like this philosophy, because cleavage was not big in that period, actually. It's big before it, and it's big after it. But I wanted it to be about, you know, they gave me the thing, you know, where the truth lies. So, you know, I wanted it to be about texture and surface, and then what was underneath. And my philosophy, I had philosophies for these things. I was like, all periods exist at once. I want to, you'd get a picture of an office for Herman Miller Furniture, and they'd say, let's do this. And I'm like, look at this picture. They have clipped all the wires off the lamps and the telephones and the typewriters because they look horrible. You know, at some point we're going to be talking about what it was like to be on a job interview and talking to someone, and their desk had the back of a computer with the dirt and the dust and like the Post-it stuck on it and the wires in your face. You won't see that. You will see our sleek, you know, Mac and flat screen, things like that. It's not what it was like, even in the 90s, whatever, as computers came up. So I said I wanted that. I wanted the ashtrays to be full. I wanted burns on people's clothing. I wanted them to look dirty a little bit, the way you would in New York in the summer. I wanted, for the clothing thing, I sort of skipped out of this, but my philosophy was unwrapping the package. That was the sex appeal, that there was all of these layers, and then underneath it were Joan's breasts. But she's dressed like a nun. It's form-fitting, and you see it, but she is always wearing something you could wear to church. I mean, there are moments where we let her out of the bag, you know, and you see what she looks like, but I really wanted it that way. I wanted true, January came out in this, I picked this nightgown for her. I said, I want one of those nightgowns that, like, the woman in the curlers is always wearing, you know, who we grew up with our moms. And it wasn't until I saw January in this. And by the way, I don't think there had been a beautiful young woman wearing one of these things anywhere near TV since the 50s. And you saw it all of a sudden, you say, oh, this is not a middle-aged woman's costume. This is a sexy, diaphanous Greek nymph. That's what they were trying to create. It is lingerie. That kind of stuff, you know. Rachel Menken wearing a Chanel suit. The Chanel suit is the symbol of the, you know, mother of the bride, the power businesswoman. It's great for 40s, 50-year-old women to have sophistication and so forth. Well, guess what? Maggie Siff put that thing on and you said, oh my God, this is a sex outfit. You know, you don't see it that way. And then I talked about their physiques. I was like, I don't want to see the Spider-Man arms. I don't want the yoga body. I would like it if you could just humor me and not become muscular. John Hamm in the pilot takes off his shirt, and every person, male and female, that came in there and said, that guy's amazing looking, but that's a real body. You know what I mean? There's no six-pack there. It almost it was character, because he was missing an element of vanity that we associate with men right now, even though he obviously is very meticulous and cares about what he looks like. But that's why I had him changing his shirt in the pilot. Like, there's the T-shirt, there's a thing. One was, I heard this story about guys would have a drawer full of shirts, and having a fresh shirt was very important for your business, and there was ironing and all these things that we don't deal with anymore. And I also love the idea of him being vulnerable for a moment, and him being on the move, and also him showing us who he was and putting it back on. And he's working out in there, smoking a cigarette with that device. That wasn't just like a kitsch joke of like, look how dumb this is. This is what it was. The guy did not run. The guy does not jog. The guy does not belong to a gym.
Going back to the costume selection,
Yeah.
how involved were you with that? I mean, say for Christina Hendricks, for example. I mean, were there
I don't make
choices
the
you were given, or how did
Yeah,
that
I mean,
work?
people give me choices, but there were two processes. There's the pilot process. I'm extremely involved, extremely, extremely involved. But I always say the same thing to all of the artists in these fields. I do not do your job. I want to be your best audience. That said, Peggy's wearing yellow. She is. No, that's good for her. That said, Peggy has to look dowdy. Okay, so Jeff Rabella, the hair guy, comes in and says, how about, shows me a picture of these bangs. I can make them for her, he says. She was in a movie. We couldn't cut her hair that much. I wanted her in a ponytail. I said that was in the script. Even before I saw Elizabeth. But he said, I can make this piece for her. And I'm like, will she wear that? It's really not flattering, And he's like, yeah, she wants to play this girl. I didn't think of the bangs. I did not decide them. What really was I said, give me what you want to do, but go to reality and bring me pictures. So that was the process on the pilot. Then Janie Bryant took this another step. Janie Bryant made these collages. They're still hanging in the hallways of our, in fact, I think they've been Xeroxed in there at AMC also. For each character, where she Xeroxed pictures from newspapers and magazines and some of its movies and some of its high style and low style, for each character, the situations they'd be in. This is where I first saw Harry Crane's bow tie. This is where I first saw, you know what I mean? Where I knew that, no, not his bow tie, his short sleeve shirts. That was one of her things. Like, he would wear them all the time, and we'd see all these guys from NASA and, a lot of ad guys. That was the essence of the character. The writing staff came in, and I had them look at Janie's boards, because she had read the script a lot, and she had met the actors, and she was guiding me creatively also. So, yeah, I'm involved. There is nothing that goes on the show that I don't see. I see pictures of everything. If I'm out of town, they will email me photos, makeup, hair, and costumes. And they will give me choices. And they are smart. They do not put anything in front of my eyes that they do not want in the show. So think about it. It's not like I found 4 radical choices. It's like, these are the ones I like. If he picks any of these, I have a favorite, but if he picks any of these, I'm okay. And I don't say no that much. I mean, and also, they wanted input. No one ever has an opinion about these things. And it's not like this OCD, like controlling, like I'm ruining your life. It's like, oh, Dan Bishop too, like, oh, well, what do you want it to be? It could be anything. Go do whatever you want is not appealing to any of us. It really isn't. Me saying to them, my parents' kitchen had this giant toaster, and it was the focus of the kitchen. My mother had these double ovens. I want that to see that clock. I want I didn't know about plaid wallpaper. Keep the design within reason. Do not pick the best of everything. I always use Don's watch as an example, or Don's car. People were disappointed who watched the show. Car people, obviously. This is an amazing period. They're like, you're in 1962? You're in 1960? Why doesn't Don have a Cadillac? Don would have a Cadillac, and they were so sure about it. And I said, I believe that successful people had Cadillacs, but Don does not have a Cadillac because Don does not feel he deserves the success, and Don drives a Buick. And by the way, it was an expensive car, but I wanted him in a convertible because I feel like it's a dad car. And he's just starting to make it. Don, could have the most beautiful car ever made. It came out that year. I didn't do it. Don could have the most beautiful watch ever made. In my opinion, and a lot of people who know the period, the Hamilton Ventura is this electric watch. It's shaped like a boomerang. It's super high 50s. It was electric, which was also an issue. That's what Don should be wearing. I'm like, no, Don has this Jaeger-LeCoultre Memovox, you know, if it came out at that point, which it hadn't. Just give Don a really nice, simple, you know, wristwatch, sport watch, whatever. I don't want them to, you know, Betty's station wagon that she gets in that accident with, the most popular car in America at that point. It's just for that group. In fact, we had a choice of like 80 colors because there were so many of them around right now. Roger could have a Thunderbird, you know. Rachel Menken can wear clothes out of Vogue because she works at a department store and she's rich. Betty Draper can have clothes that she goes to buy, but I wanted her to repeat outfits, right? She gets dressed up special in that second episode to go see the shrink. You see that dress again when she goes to do her holiday card. It's a very special dress to her. I really wanted that. I really wanted it to have this feeling, this extra sense of a universe, you know, that was complete, that it was like where they were. It wasn't just all the drawers are full. I mean, I went very literal about it. The suitcases are full. Don opens his drawers, there's pens and papers, the secretaries, there's shit in there. Those typewriters work, you know. The typewriters were a big source of controversy also because they hadn't come out at that time, this electric, and we couldn't get enough of the regular electric typewriters. And I was talked into using this thing because it was only about 5 months away. And I said, at the moment, I go, if the show succeeds, we're never going to hear the end of this. But it'll be a great problem to have. And it turned out to be true. People are like, it's a real environment, my ass. Those typewriters are wrong. I'm like, guys, I can't believe that they care about this. I'm so thrilled.
Were there moments with your key staff that they really argued for something that you weren't sure about, that they got their way, or?
I'm sure there are. I don't really ever. Here's the thing is, I have extreme opinions. It's confusing to people. I have extreme opinions. I am lay down the law, but you can talk me out of anything with a creative argument. And I'm looking for an argument. I'm looking for you to give me a reason. You know? I've been lied to a couple of times, and that has really frustrated me, where people have told me things are period and they know they're not and they just want them. That's happened a couple of times. You know, no one, the headboard on the bed, Amy Wells, who was the set decorator for the first 3 seasons of the show, said, I found this headboard because I had a colonial headboard in the pilot. And I always imagined Betty having this colonial bedroom, which she does. And she said, I found this headboard, and it was contemporary, but it was in the style of that thing. And she said, I think that her bed is very important to her. I feel like that is everything to her in her house, and it should be sumptuous. And maybe a decorator picked it out for her, but it should have this texture, and it should, you know, you write all these scenes in bed. I want it to feel like Betty picked it. And I looked at the thing, and I actually said, I was like, it's this green. I think it's kind of iconic at this point for the show. It's gone now. It's a green velvet, basically plush, buttoned, you know, Regency headboard, which is also something no one was paying attention to at that time. And I looked at it and I said, I want to fuck it. She said, that's my point. And I was like, okay, you win, let's do it. But it was high risk. It was extreme. And I try not to do those things. And then I realized, like, some people are extreme about things. She fought for that. I should definitely say that. And I'm sure Janie has fought for some stuff for sure.
As the seasons go on, too, and time progresses forward, I mean, are you still as active in that decision-making?
Yes. I've learned to delegate a little bit, but in the end, I will never let go of that stuff. We don't want to change anything. We're superstitious. You know, they could all farm out their work also, but the thing that's really helped me is that the writer's room has changed, and that the time that I spend in there is so much more productive, and that Maria and Andre, especially this season, I've always had a number 2 there, but this is the first season 4, where I came in with my idea. Maybe I've gotten more confident too, I don't know, but this is the thing that's unique about that writer's room. No one ever pitches anything that's so insane that I say, never. I go in, I mean, they used to. And I don't go in there and just tear stuff down anymore. I tell them, this is the story I want to do. How do we do this? Can you help me flesh this out? I'd like it to end like this. And I go in there and progress has been made. And I don't hear a lot of like, I shouldn't say it as negatively as it is. I've worked on a lot of shows and been in that room, obviously, other than this show. That's my job. And we would always come up with stuff that we were really excited about, and the boss would come in and say, you don't understand the show, and throw it out and flush it down the toilet. Or we would have something that we all knew that was probably an interesting right way to go, and they would be too scared to do it. And I am very proud of myself that certainly at this point, I may shit on their ideas occasionally and try and explain to them, and that is my job, to be the mind that focuses everything. But there are very few risks that I'm not willing to take, you know. I talked about this lawnmower thing that came from me, that I wanted to cut this guy's foot off. How do we do this? You know, I remember.
Why did you want that moment?
That it's a good cross section of actually how the show works. I wanted to do a show about American business, and how from an almost Emersonian angle, we are not Europeans, and the British had bought us, and they admired us, and they wanted to gut it. They wanted to emulate us, and at the same time to do this thing about our lack of respect for where we are. So maybe it's even the Indians who this country belongs to. It's not even us. And Don is from a farm, Ken is from a farm. They get this lawnmower in there, this tractor, this urban tractor. Look how far we are from everything. This is what it came from, I swear. And that they would not have respect for this piece of machinery. They did not understand the earth. They did not understand nature, and the British didn't understand them. So then it just became a matter of the evolution of doing this in a realistic way, that what I wanted was this guy to come in and to look like they were taking over the entire agency, and that Don was going to be completely subjugated to this guy, and then for him to be injured in this freak accident and everything to return to normal. And but as pretentious as it sounds, what I really wanted to say was, these people have this farm equipment in there, and they are not farmers. They are drunk city dwellers, and that's why somebody got hurt. And then, as it evolved, it became about expectation. It's structurally about expectation. It's emotionally about expectation. My wife really found it. I was writing it. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. The first draft was really very far from where it had to be. No fault of Robin's, but it was way, way beyond anyone else doing this. It is a very unconventional story in a completely revolutionary, for our world, for sure, structure. And it has, consequences. I think the tape's running out.
Okay, let's stop there then.